My name is Bruno Bianchi Sarcone, and we are starting the Spanish Non-Lucrative Visa webinar. Today is February 10th, 2026. We're going to go through a presentation and then a Q&A session. You can ask your questions anytime during the webinar. Just make sure to add a question mark at the end so it's easy for me to find the question and publish it for everyone to read. I will answer all the questions during the Q&A session. Also, very important, tomorrow I have a Q&A session about anything related to move to Spain, hosted by me and Ainhoa Manero, expert immigration lawyer. So if you have immigration doubts, this is the time to ask. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. CET. Okay, ask me anything about moving to Spain. And then if you're interested specifically in the non-lucrative visa, March 10th, there's a free Q&A session also with her. You can ask any question related to the non-lucrative visa. The content of this webinar is structured in a timeline before application, during the application, and after the approval. We're going to talk about definitions, consulates, BLS offices, tax residency and considerations, NLV eligibility and requirements. Then we're going to go through the timing and application process, and arrival in Spain, renewal, long-term residency, citizenship, and transition to work permit. The content of this webinar is for information purposes only and is not legal advice. The requirements listed here are not official. Please check your specific consulates and BLS offices requirements. Our objective in Spainguru.es is facilitating the relocation process for English-speaking foreigners to Spain since 2014. You can find very good reviews on Trustpilot especially, and on Google. Almost 300 5-star reviews, so you are in good hands. And you can use Spainguru.es for free. I send a weekly newsletter to 18,000 readers. I have a YouTube channel with more than 8,500 subscribers, 8 webinars, visa guides, community support, more than 2,000 articles, and a huge community with a total aggregated number of members of 150,000. So it's pretty huge. And the most important and relevant group for you today is the Spanish NLV group that I highly recommend you joining. There's your QR code. It's 27,000 members, super active group. And if you're planning to move to Spain, I have created a free, no sign-up required move to Spain checklist on Spainguru.es with all the steps starting 1 year before your move to Spain. And if you need expert advice, I highly recommend you at least engaging with immigration lawyer and tax experts at the very least, but not only those, also financial planners, health insurance providers, medical certificates, phone translations. Have vetted personally the best professionals out there to help you with any of these things, and you are in good hands. You can contact them anytime. Just go to spainguru.es/services and you will find their links. Now let's start with before the application. But first of all, what is the Spanish non-lucrative visa? It is a Spanish visa for non-EU citizens who can financially support themselves and who don't need to work in Spain. It is defined by 2 laws. The main organic law for 2000, yes, and there you can see a pyramid, so you can see the hierarchy of the law. So the main top hierarchy is the main organic law, and then the regulation of the law, also called bylaw, that recently changed, and the changes took effect last May 20th, 2025, which is lower in hierarchy. It is less important, and that has deep implications into many of the things that we're going to discuss today. And inside the bylaw, the articles 61 to 64 define the non-lucrative visa. You can read those articles for yourself, so you read the law from the source. Now let's talk about specifically Spanish consulates abroad in these 4 countries: USA, UK, Canada, and Australia. Right? So if you're applying for from any of these countries, you will need to be a legal resident within the jurisdiction of one of those consulates to be able to apply for the Spanish non-lucrative visa. It is not possible to apply for the non-lucrative visa from within Spain. You can modify a current residency in Spain into a non-lucrative residency, but for the initial application, it has to be done from abroad, okay, and from the specific consulate that is your consulate where you're a legal resident. Now, many of these consulates, they outsource the processing of any of the Spanish visas, okay, and specifically the non-lucrative visa. For example, in the UK, all the consulates outsource the service to a third-party company called BLS, company from India. In the USA, not all the consulates outsource, but for example, Miami, LA, San Francisco, they use BLS, okay? But for example, New York City, you still have to deal directly with New York City. So first, understand which is your consulate. Second, understand whether you have to deal with BLS because they are processing the non-lucrative visa. Now, very interesting resource here. On Spainguru, you can find a dedicated page for the NLV applications for each of these consulates. And the interesting part is not only you will find the official links that will redirect you to the official requirements and BLS page, but also first-hand experiences. I try to compile every time that someone shares a first-hand experience and upload it to each one of these pages so that you have one place, one source where you can read all the experiences ordered by time, okay, by chronology. This is the case of Miami, and it is very important and very interesting to read about everyone's experience when applying for the non-lucrative visa, because you will find extra requirements and tips and potentially errors that these applicants have made, so you can avoid making them yourself. As we mentioned, the outsourced service is with a company called BLS International. It's a huge Indian company with presence in 66 countries. They provide outsourcing services for different countries. For example, also Germany, you will find it as well. And they're very big, okay? They're very big. So when your consulate deals with BLS or outsource the non-lucrative visa processing to BLS, you will have to deal directly with the BLS. You will not deal with the consulate, okay? We're going to mention the Schengen area several times during this presentation, so it's worth to take a look to it. It is a 29 European countries group, okay, of countries, which is internally borderless. So there's no immigration control internally, only in the outside, okay, only in the out borders of this group of 29 countries. So when you enter Schengen and you get out from Schengen, you will have immigration control. But when you travel around any of these countries, back and forth, you will not have immigration control unless accepted, okay? So that's important. Now let's talk about visa requirements for Spain and also Schengen. You probably heard that as a non-European passport holder, there's two situations in which you can enter Schengen. Either you are a passport holder of certain countries who don't need a Schengen visa to enter the Schengen space as a tourist. This is the case of USA, UK, Canada, Australia. Or, for example, you're a holder of a country that requires a Schengen tourist visa to enter the space. This is the case, for example, of Philippines, okay? Once you enter the space as a non-EU passport holder, you have up to 90 days in a 180 days period to permission to stay as a tourist. Then you have to leave. So many people just stay 90 days. They go outside of Schengen area for 90 days. So total 180 days passed, and then they go back inside the Schengen area for 90 days, and then they go back. This is called the Schengen shuffle, right? Now, if you want to stay more than 90 days in any of the countries within the Schengen area, you need to obtain a visa that will grant you a residency. Now, the definition of temporary residency versus long-term residency in Spain is temporary residency or temporary visas are visas who will grant you a residency permit for more than 90 days, but less than 5 years. And more than 5 years, these are called long-term residencies. So the non-lucrative residency is a temporary residency, okay? Now, what is the difference between the residency and the visa? The visa is the paper that is stick to your passport that you obtain at a consulate with a certain validity of 1 year in the case of the NLV. Once you enter Spain, you have officially 30 days to get a residency. Tarjeta de identidad extranjero or TIE card at a national police station or foreign office by putting your fingerprints, etc. And then you will be holder of a non-lucrative residency. The visa then no longer is valid, okay? So remember this, the non-lucrative visa is for non-EU passport holders. Now, if you're a citizen of any of the European Union countries or associate countries like Switzerland, Norway, Iceland, or are you married or spouse or legal couple of passport holder of any of these countries, then there are other better options than the non-lucrative residency or visa, okay? To give you an example, if you plan to retire in Spain and any of you or your spouse has the possibility to obtain an EU passport, many British people can obtain the Irish passport, for example, many people obtain the Italian passport, etc., then it is much better, it is much easier, more straightforward to get a residency in Spain because you have the right to obtain it and the financial thresholds are much lower. You get work permits, you don't have to renew after 1 year, and then in periods of 2 years, it's valid for 5 years. So it's much better if you have a European Union passport, okay? So a lot of people are thinking about doing the NLV while having the possibility of having an EU passport. Don't think it twice. If it's close in time, try to get a European Union passport. Otherwise, as a non-EU passport holder, the non-lucrative visa may be a good pathway to live in Spain more than 90 days. Now let's go to tax considerations, okay? First of all, the most important concept is tax residency in Spain. You become a tax resident in Spain, and when that happens, you must pay taxes on your global income and potentially on the net value of your assets via the regional wealth tax and the national solidarity tax. If any of these three conditions apply, the most common one, if you spend more than 183 days in Spain within a calendar year, that is from January 1st to December 31st. This is the tax year. Very different from the immigration year. The immigration year is a natural year that starts the day that your residency starts, any day of the year. Now, if you spend more than 183 days within a calendar year or tax year, and the way you calculate it, the days don't need to be consecutive. It doesn't matter if you spend them as a tourist. It doesn't matter if you're a visa holder. This is very important because a lot of people come to Spain after July 2nd thinking that they're going to be only staying 182 days without having to become a Spanish tax resident, but they forgot a scouting trip at the beginning of the year that they did for 89 days. And they had to add all those days. Therefore, the Spanish tax authorities will say you're a Spanish tax resident. So be careful with that. Second condition is whether your primary income source is from Spain or sourced in Spain. And the third condition is if your family lives in Spain. So some people say, oh, my husband is working in Dubai, paying low taxes. He's going to send us money, to the family, wife and kids, and we're going to be on a non-lucrative visa. Be careful because that setup is perfect for Spanish tax authorities to say that the man in Dubai is a tax resident in Spain, right? So this is important. One thing is tax residency, and another thing is immigration status. Okay, these are two different things. They often overlap, but they are not the same. A little tax overview. Now, coming soon, Form 720, you need to declare your overseas assets and rights held abroad in different categories like bank accounts, real estate, etc. if the total category is over 50,000 euros, and the deadline is very soon on March 31st. This happens when you become a Spanish tax resident. Income tax, you have the annual declaration with deadline on June 30th, paying ordinary income at ranges 19% to 47%. And then there is the regional wealth tax that will depend where you move in Spain. For example, Madrid, Andalusia, Cantabria, Extremadura don't have wealth tax, okay? And then there is also the national solidarity tax, which is all over the country, but the threshold to kick in is much higher than 3 million euros plus an allowance of 700,000 euros, okay? So choose wisely where you move in Spain if you are in this situation. The deadline for the wealth tax is June 30th, and the deadline for solidarity tax is July 31st. Remember that Spain has double taxation agreements with more than 90 countries, including the USA, UK, Canada, Australia, etc. And that will avoid you from paying taxes on the same thing. It doesn't matter, it doesn't mean that you will pay less taxes necessarily, unfortunately, but it means that you won't pay taxes twice on the same category of things, making it that if you have paid tax on a certain thing, you will be able to credit that payment towards the payment of the same category in another jurisdiction, okay? So that's why many people, for example, Americans, they pay taxes in Spain first. With the money that they pay taxes in Spain, they inform this to US tax authorities, and therefore they don't have to pay taxes in the US, just fine. If you wanna know more about taxes, please join my free webinar. I get you free recording, and of course, there's a Q&A session at the end. Now, let's talk about the non-lucrative visa documentation. And this is a summary list, okay? Just to mention some important things, and then we're gonna go deeper into each one of them. First, when you apply for the non-lucrative visa, they will ask you an address in Spain. Depending on the consulate, they will ask you one thing or another. Typical thing is, they'll be happy if you say, I'll move to Seville province or to Valencia province, and that will be enough. But some consulates are stricter and they have a strange interpretation of the rule, and they want a specific address. They want sometimes even a rental contract, okay? And sometimes they even set the minimum to 3 months of that rental contract. So people, in order not to fight or to add friction into the process, they will provide a rental contract using, for example, Airbnb or Booking.com, a booking of 3 months. okay? And then maybe they cancel it, then maybe they reduce it, okay? Potentially harming the landlord, right? But this is the way they do it. Now, I have a video with Ainhoa Manero where she answers more than 20 frequently asked questions. And one of the questions is, what's her thoughts on providing a rental contract in Spain? Long story, to consulates. Long story short, she says that she never does that for her clients. They shouldn't ask that because it's nowhere in the rule, in the regulation, that they can ask for it, okay? But, of course, I understand that everyone wants to reduce friction and they prefer to provide their rental contract in those specific consulates. We're talking about DC, Chicago, Boston. There's a few, okay? For example, Los Angeles, no, they don't ask for it. Then, addressing country of residence. You need to prove that you're a legal resident within the jurisdiction of the consulate where you're applying from. In the US, you have to show your driving license. In the UK, you need to show utilities. You need to show your address via your bank statements, etc. Prove sufficient financial means to support yourself and dependents without working. Have comprehensive health insurance from a company authorized to operate in Spain. But also, if you're a UK retiree, you could instead show a S1 form, which would grant you access to the public healthcare system in Spain. Okay, so you would be saving having to get private health insurance. Then a clean criminal background check, a medical certificate. It's a one-page document that states you're free of diseases that could have serious public health repercussions. We're talking about, yellow fever, these kind of things. Then if you're applying with spouses, you would need to provide a new marriage certificate. If you're applying with dependent children, new birth certificates. And you will have to somehow prove that you will not engage in any work or professional activities in Spain, and sometimes even remotely. How do you do this? Normally via a letter of intent, not always. Sometimes it's a requirement, sometimes it's not, depends on the consulate. There's letter of intent templates on Spainguru.es. Then more documentations, depending on how you apply. If you're applying with kids, for example, some consulates, they ask for school enrollment. I'm hearing this in Miami, in Houston, as we said, rental contracts sometimes, etc., etc. They will also ask for photography, for fees, payments. Everyone applying, every single member of the family has to pay fees, forms, etc., etc. So roughly, this is what you need to provide, okay? Also bank statements, sometimes tax returns, etc. As I said, this video, I think, is a must-see. I recorded at the beginning of the year, top 20 questions of the NLV in 2026. I think you should watch it because Ainhoa Manero really summarizes the answers very, very well for each one of the questions. Now, let's go deeper into each one of these requirements. Let's talk about the financial requirements. I said 2025. Really, I should update that to 2026, but the fact is, it's the same, okay? Because the financial requirements are based on an index that is published every time the national budget is updated. And unfortunately, or fortunately, it doesn't matter, the government in Spain hasn't been able to update the national budget for the last 3 years. They haven't had the political agreement to do so. And every time the national budget is updated, the IPREM index is updated, okay? And as you can see, the progression of the IPREM index in the last 20 years, it always has been going up. But as you can see, the last 4 years, 2023 until this one, it's been staying frozen in time, right? Now, let's translate this into euros. The main applicant has to pay the annual IPREM by 4, okay? This is 7,200 euros times 4. The main applicant needs to prove that has funding 28,800 euros. And all these figures are in euros, not in dollars, pounds, or anything else, euros. Okay, so check the currency conversion. And each dependent, that is spouse, that is children, dependents, are 100% of the IPREM, which is 7,200 euros, right? So if you look at the table on the right, a couple would be 28,800 euros plus spouse, 7,200 euros, total 36,000 euros. That's the minimum financial threshold to apply for the non-lucrative visa as a couple. Now, how do you prove that you have enough funds? Well, you can have savings in the bank, or, for example, you can have passive income. For example, typically pension withdrawals, right? Or you can combine any of those. It could be certain percentage savings, it could be certain percentage passive income, okay? Certain percentage could be rental income. This is passive income. But I put an asterisk there because there's more and more problems about this type of income because certain authorities, certain consulates consider this type of income to be an unsafe type of income because the tenant can stop paying anytime. Okay, so they may be a little bit concerned about that type of rental income. Therefore, you shouldn't use it as the main source of proof of funding, in my opinion. Okay. But of course, you will find people who were accepted with 100% rental income, and they will tell you, no, it's not true. Well, you're rolling the dice. This is the truth. Okay. You can also use dividends. You can use funds available by credit card, as long as you can prove that they are readily available without penalties, that they are liquid. It is in the law. Okay, that you can use credit from your credit card. Okay, even for renewal as well. How do you prove all this? By showing bank statements, depending on the consulate, 3 months bank statement, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, you name it. And documentation from your bank, wherever you have those funds. Okay, and we're going to talk about later requirements about more certificates that you need to show. Some consulates will also ask for tax returns, especially if you are applying with older dependents. Okay, and remember, this is very important. You need to think about the renewal, because almost as soon as you arrive in Spain and you are in the honeymoon of just arriving to your new country, very soon you will have to renew your non-lucrative residency, because as soon as 1 year after your initial entry into Spain should coincide with that date, 60 days before the expiration date of your residency card, you have to start renewing your non-lucrative residency. That will grant you a permit for 2 more years, and then you will have to renew again for 2 more years. But the financial threshold for the renewal, depending on the province, and especially if you have only savings, they may ask you for double the amount of the initial application IPREM, okay? Considering that the IPREM stayed the same. Now, as you remember, I showed you this. If the next year in 2027, there is agreement and there's new budget, and they maybe raise the IPREM from 600 euros per month to 700 euros per month, then the main applicant will have to prove 33,600 euros instead of 28.8K. So you need to budget accordingly. You need to be conservative, because the new renewals will then be calculated with the new IPREM. So be careful with that. Yes. And we spoke about rental income. This is a person who was refused in June 2024, okay, in Washington, D.C., and said the main income sources were saving and rental income. Reason given, they do not accept rental income. Okay. This is the case of D.C. in 2024. Things may have changed, and it also happens that depending who is looking at your case, they may be more strict, less strict, etc. But this was a case that I could gather for you to see from the NLV group. Also, we mentioned that they may be double the amount for renewals. It will depend by province. People report, for example, in Valencia, they just need 1 year of funding. Whereas in Alicante, same region, but different province, they may need 2. In Almeria, only 1, they reported, right? So as you can see, there are strong variations. We mentioned also that apart from the bank statements, and depending how many months of bank statements, depending on the consulate, they will also require extra documentations as of May 20th, 2025, that coincides with the release or, the date of new effect of the new reglamento, but it's not in the new reglamento. This is something that started to happen that day. They also want to match all the information just to make sure that there is no fraud. Yes, so they want to see your full name. They want to see the full bank name. They want to see the full bank account. Some people cross with X's for privacy reasons, for security reasons. There's been denials. There's been problems with that. The authorities want to see everything, okay? Some people say, like, I'm not going to share this with an Indian company, but you risk denial, okay? Or you risk having to submit the documentation later on with a narrow window to do it, 10 days only, right? So this is the situation. They want to see the account opening date or closing date if applicable, and the most controversial part, balance as of December 31st. They want to see some stable amount of money, okay, in the bank from the previous year. So if you're applying in 2026, they want to see 31st of December 2025, and also the average balance. Sometimes it's the average monthly balance, yes, of the year, okay, and sometimes it is just the balance of the full year, right? But they want to see it, and sometimes people can't provide this because their banks don't issue this type of certificate that are quite common in Spain, and that's why they ask it. if you look at my bank account, BBVA, this is a screenshot of a certificate that I get on my phone. Actually, this is a screenshot from my phone. So you can see that there is a wet ink stamp JPEG image there. It's not a true wet ink stamp, but authorities love to see stamps. Okay, that's another big one. Some people, for example, in Bordeaux, they had problems to show bank statements with a wet ink stamp. And I asked this, how to solve it to Ainhoa Manero. And Ainhoa said, then you go to a notary public, you show your phone to the notary public. The notary public says, oh, it's true that you have this money and that those are your statements. And then you print them out and he signs, and then you get an apostille for that signature. And that's what you bring to the consulate to make it look official, because the person in the consulate says, if there's no wet ink stamp, then how do I know that these are official bank statements, right? So this is very strict interpretation, but it has happened, okay, about the wet ink stamp. So it's all mixed. And the more official you can make it look like, the better chances or the stronger the case you are making. Again, watch that video because it's my opinion, it's weight in gold. Now, big question as well. Can I work remotely for non-Spanish companies? This is a big one too. And a lot of people get very, very angry when they listen to what I'm going to say. Yes, you can work remotely for non-Spanish companies under the non-lucrative visa, but with huge conditions, okay? And don't take this out of context. This is the situation. The non-lucrative visa was created before remote work was a thing. They were thinking about people coming into Spain and take jobs from Spaniards from the Spanish market, okay? So definitely it is absolutely forbidden, and it's very clear that you shouldn't work in Spain, okay, for Spanish companies. But remotely, it is a gray area, and there is a Supreme Court ruling that says you can work remotely for non-Spanish companies under a non-lucrative residency, therefore making it a gray area. Now, if you apply from consulate, and I will give plenty of examples, and you create the smallest doubt, or you mention that you plan, or that you are working and so on, it's very, very, very possible that they deny your non-lucrative residency. Now, once you are in Spain with your non-lucrative visa, with your non-lucrative residency, nothing happens if you're working remotely. You pay your taxes on your global income once you become a Spanish tax resident. You have your private health insurance. You still renew your non-lucrative visa or residency with your passive income or your savings, etc. You don't use your active income, and there's no cross in between the tax office and the immigration office. There's many people doing this out there, even on YouTube, and they're telling it to you. Okay, and that is the situation. So I'm not recommending you to do anything if you have remote work. Maybe now there's the digital nomad visa that is a better type of visa for you. Okay, and this is absolutely not legal advice. In the situation, and if you want to hear it from the words of an expert immigration lawyer, please watch the video with Ainhoa Manero, which is basically she's saying what I just said. And to give you another example on why consulates are their own kingdoms and why sometimes they even permit officially to be working under the non-lucrative residency, there is this famous case. Only we've seen it at Edinburgh, where they officially state that they will accept you working with special types of work. Basically, they're talking about working in the oil platform in the Northern Sea, for example. But I know also has had customers who are pilots who, for example, go back every 15 days or every month. They work, they do a long haul flight, then they go back to Spain. They stay in Spain without working 1 month. And this is the same that happens for someone who is working at an oil rig. And we had a comment from a Spainguru community member saying that they got the NLV successfully at Edinburgh with the husband working at the oil rig. And very recently, last week, they also were kind enough to share that they were able to renew the non-lucrative visa without any problems. If you want to read all these articles, please go on Spainguru.es, scroll down, you have all the articles, and also sign up for the weekly newsletter because I send you all the news. And I'm pretty sure that not many people keep you updated with those things in particular. Now, let's go with the private health insurance requirement. As we said, if you're applying for this visa, either you apply with the private health insurance, or if you're a UK retiree, potentially, instead, you could use the S1 form. Now, if you're applying, if you're in this first case, there's a need to apply with a compliant health insurance policy. And how do you make it compliant? There are certain conditions that you need to fulfill. The first one, there can't be any co-payments. This is very important. Second, no reimbursements for several consulates, although it is a little bit of a gray area. I tell you this because there are some policies that say that they are compliant, but they have reimbursement clauses, and depending who reads the condition of the health insurance, there could be denials or not because of the reimbursement clauses. There shouldn't be any waiting periods. There should be full coverage with an asterisk, okay? Because there's a huge nuance there. And we're gonna go back to that. And very important, most companies will ask you to pay a full year in advance because they need the full payment in order to issue a certificate of coverage that must be in Spanish with a specific wording. It's a one-page certificate that you need to submit with your file, okay? And this is very important, and we're gonna talk about this too. Let's go with the frequently asked questions. Are my medicines covered compared to the USA? For example, in the USA, it's very common that medicines gets, let's say, paid in half or full by the private health insurance. In Spain, it is absolutely not common, except very small exceptions. You always have to pay retail price for your medicines, okay? What should be the health insurance start date? There's no clear answer to this question. Some people say when you have your appointment at the office, you need to have started your health insurance policy. Some people say that you need to guesstimate, considering processing times, when you're going to be able to have a valid visa, and you should start it on the same month, the first day on the same month in which you start your visa. For example, you apply now, you consider 2 months of processing, 8 weeks, okay, so 10th of March, so you start it on the 1st of March. This is the most common way to do it, but the best is to go with an experienced, either exclusive agent, like the one I recommend, who is also an immigration lawyer, who can tell you exactly what to do, and also extend the start date before the policy starts in the future, okay, so that you don't use the policy and you don't eat any of the 12 months that you have for the policy, okay, because if you start using it and you still didn't get the visa, it could also become a little problem, okay? Are the health insurance for older than 75 years of age? Yes, they're less common, they're expensive, but it's possible. Adeslas, for example, has, and also the KV has, but it could be that any given year, any of the big companies offer compliant policies for older than 75. But definitely that's a point of friction. The older you get, the harder it is to get coverage, and the younger you are, the more scrutiny you face because authorities think you're going to be working. What if I have pre-existing conditions? Now, there's serious pre-existing conditions and not serious ones. For example, if you have had cancer diagnosis within the last 5 years, it's very hard to get coverage. Unfortunately, you need to wait the full 5 years, okay, of remission, to give you an example. But if you have, for example, high blood pressure, these kind of things, these are small pre-existing conditions. And what can happen, and circling back to the full coverage condition, is that the company will be able to cover you and issue a fully compliant certificate of coverage in Spanish, but include or exclude those pre-existing conditions from your coverage. Therefore, if you obtain your non-lucrative visa, you're in Spain, if you have any medical problems related to those pre-existing conditions, then you will have to pay your treatment out of pocket, okay? But still you will have a compliant policy, right? So this is a little bit of a fix that they do, right? And connecting to the next question, can I pay into the Spanish public system? The answer is yes. After 1 year of residency, there's something called the Convenio Especial, which is a bit different by region because each region has its own health public system. But roughly you will be paying 60 euros if you're younger than 65 years of age. And if you're older, 150 euros per month, okay? The cool thing about the Convenio Especial is that you would be covered for the treatment for any pre-existing conditions that you have. Okay, so you need to pass the first year, and then you are able to apply for the Convenio Especial. It takes a few months to have effective access, but it is one great solution, okay? And once you have the public healthcare system via the Convenio Especial, you could potentially, for the second renewal, not the first one, because usually it's too early, use it instead of a private health insurance as coverage for the renewal, okay? Always remember not to have any health insurance coverage gaps that could actually create problems when you go to obtain your long-term residency. There can't be any gaps. And also for the renewals, be careful with that, okay? Always go with professionals. Can I use my current health insurance from the UK and USA? Short answer is, if it's compliant, yes. But the long answer, unfortunately, is like highly not recommended because of many problems that brings for people who do it. Certificate of coverage is done in Spanish. It doesn't have the right wording. You need to soon translate. There's usually co-payments, reimbursement clauses that could bring friction there, etc. It could be considered to be a travel insurance by the officer reviewing your case. So many problems it could have. And usually, the health insurance policy in Spain by Spanish companies is quite affordable for what it offers. Okay, so I wouldn't do it. Okay, but of course, if it's compliant, why not? If they have authorization to operate in Spain. This is also a very important condition. Can I apply with a UK S1 form if I'm a UK retiree? Yes, as we said. Do I need to have a Spanish bank account? No, you don't. But it's true that if you had one, because you've been living here before, etc., there could be some possibility with some companies to pay on a monthly basis, and still they will issue you the certificate of coverage. I heard this. Never seen it, okay, but I heard it. Can I pay on a monthly basis in those cases? Can there be reimbursements? Gray area. Houston consulate says no reimbursements. Some other consulates outside the US, I've seen in Venezuela, I've seen in Chile, etc., they say no reimbursements, okay? But sometimes they forget to put it on the web. So it is not absolutely clear. It is not universal. But I personally think that you are taking a risk if you have reimbursements, okay? So that's the situation. Now let's talk about the most famous health insurance companies in Spain. You have Adeslas, Asisa, DKV, ASA, Salud Cáceres, Sanitas, AXA, Mafre, for example. These are just a few. By size, Adeslas is by far the biggest, the largest. The combination of the second and the third is the size of Adeslas, like Sanitas, Asisa, DKV. And recently somebody was posting in American Expat group if they've been reading horror stories about private health insurance. Look, I'm not going to come here and defend, insurance companies, okay? They're not angels. Let's be true and real. But in my more than 20 years in Spain, I used 3 of those companies, and I never had any problem. So, of course, you hear a lot of horror stories. And if you go to Airbnb, Trustpilot, you'll see 2.3 out of 5 stars. If you look at IKEA, you will see 1.4 stars, right, out of 5. But I always go to IKEA to buy my furniture, okay? And I had problems, of course, but they're the best, in my opinion, right? So this is, don't get too concerned, in my opinion, about the reviews that you find online, because it is much easier to see the dark side of it, okay? This is an important thing that I need to bring to your attention. Sometimes BLS, which is a private company, and they're not babies, they're not angels either. Sometimes they have a pop-up and they try to sell you things. Okay, so be careful with that, because one of the most misleading pop-ups that they have is in Washington, D.C., and I heard also Manila, that they want to sell you a travel health insurance. Some people hire this insurance thinking that this is a compliant NLV insurance, which is far from being one. And if you read, and I'm sorry for the noisy slide here, if you read the requirements in BLS and in the consulate, they say no travel health insurance will be accepted for the visas. So be careful with that. Only buy compliant NLV insurance. Make sure that you're buying one. As you know, I have more than 250 5-star reviews. You're in good hands. If you're gonna contact for free and no extra cost to you, if you hire it, Carlos Blanco is my preferred recommended exclusive agent of Adeslas, which is probably the best value company in Spain. And he's also an immigration lawyer, and he has a huge advantage because he can extend the start date of your policy in the future in case things get delayed, which happens, unfortunately, too often. So definitely he's the best one out there, and I'm very happy. I have been recommending him for several years without any issues. On the contrary, with very good reviews that you can read later on if you want in the recording that I will send you. Now let's talk about the medical certificate. This is, of course, health, but it has nothing to do with health insurance. It is a one-page document that needs to be signed by a doctor. The wording has to be exact without changing a single comma. Okay, so the best is to use a template provided by the consulate. Normally, the template is in English, and most of the times it's also in Spanish in the same page, just like the one you see in the screenshot there. The best of using this one, the true language one, is that if the doctor signs both parts, you will save a sworn translation, which is around between 35 to 42 euros, depending who you use. If it's only in English, you will have to sworn translate it into Spanish. Now, depending who signs where you're applying from and the nationality of the doctor, let's say, more than nationality, where the doctor is operating, there will be one story or another. If you're in the USA, Canada, for example, or Australia, you need to print this template with the doctor's letterhead, make it look official. The doctor needs to fill everything up, not the front desk person, has to be the doctor. The doctor hopefully will stamp it with a wet ink stamp, with a registration number as a doctor, will sign both parts, okay? And that will be enough for you to submit. Now, in the case of the UK, if the doctor is from the UK, in the UK, the doctor needs to be registered at the Foreign Office, needs to be FCDO registered. And his signature, or her signature, has to be apostilled too. Be careful with that. This is the only country that requires this. The doctor's signature needs to be apostilled in this case. Now, there is another way to do it, which is using a Spanish doctor, okay, which I put you in contact with one on Spainguru.es. Has several advantages, but we need to look at the conditions. The advantage is that if you use the Spanish doctor, the certificate is only in Spanish. It doesn't need to be sworn translated, and it cannot be apostilled because it's a Spanish authority. Okay, you save money there. Cool thing is also you do it fully online, okay, via Zoom call. There's a questionnaire, asks you, issues the certificate, sends you the attached PDF with his signature and everything, and that you print it out and you add it to the file, right? Now, there's been in the past some issues because some consulates suddenly started with new interpretations of no rule, saying that you needed to be physically present in the country of Spain at the same time in which the medical certificate was issued. There were big bunch of denials in Manchester because of this, and still, for example, Lisbon, San Francisco have problems with this, okay? But many other consulates accept the certificate of the doctor, regardless if you were in Spain or not. For example, Miami. And now all the UK consulates are accepting the certificate from the Spanish doctor too, okay? And they're not checking if you were in the country. So this is changing all the time. And sometimes, going to the first question, my doctor won't sign the medical certificate template because some doctors look at this and they say, what is this? I'm not going to sign this. Or they want to change the wording, which is very dangerous. They want to add, to the best of my knowledge. There's been denials because of that, right? Don't change anything from the template. Or they don't want to sign anything in Spanish because they don't speak Spanish and they're not comfortable signing that. So maybe you want to use a Spanish doctor, okay? So you can contact at no cost on Spainguru.es, and if you get the certificate, of course, you pay the doctor for the certificate. And the doctor will tell you whether his certificate is accepted at the consulate we are applying or not, before going to the phone call and before issuing anything, right? For the UK, my doctor is not FCDO registered. Is his certificate valid? Unfortunately, not, because you need to apostille it. How do I know the Spanish doctor certificate is accepted at my consulate? Contact him via Spainguru. There's no cost. Just say which consulate you're applying from, and the doctor will tell you, yes, last month I had like 20 certificates accepted or not. That consulate is not accepting my certificate unless you are physically present in Spain. Okay? The doctor will never issue a certificate that is not sure that it will work or not. Okay? Unfortunately, this is the problem with the consulates. Every consulate is different, and they, take out new rules from their sleeves. So this is a table that summarizes everything that I said about the medical certificate and the variations among the different countries and the different types of doctors. Now let's talk about the clean criminal background check. This is usually the document that takes the longest to obtain. Okay, sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow, but 99% of the times you need to start with or by the background, obtaining the background check, right? So in the UK, it's called the ACRO. In the US, it's the FBI background check, right? And usually, the most conservative stance is to consider that it has a validity of 3 months, not 6, okay? Now, depending on the consulate, they state that the validity is 6 months, or they state that the validity is 3 months. When there is no stated validity, consider that it is 3 months, okay? Unless stated otherwise on the document itself, okay? Sometimes the document, okay, the police check from certain countries says this document is valid for 1 year, for 6 months, right? And, this is something that the authority will honor, right? But generally consider 3 months. So it needs to be valid at the time of submission, right? And it needs to be apostilled by the authority that issued them. In the case of the USA, it needs to be a federal apostille, and it needs to be sworn translated into Spanish. Let's go to the frequently asked questions. Am I still eligible with records on my background check? It depends how serious they are. Is enough time happened and they're not serious, like smoking pot, or driving under the influence 20 years ago, stuff like that, usually there's no problem, usually. Now, if you have something more serious, you serve conviction time, violent crimes, stuff like that, fraud, these are serious offenses, and it could be a straight denial. Now, if you're in this situation, always go with the professional who knows their job. Like the ones I recommend, like I know, for example, okay, or any of the other lawyers I recommend, they will do the job of considering your crime and bring it to or compare it to the Spanish system. And if in Spain that crime should have been deleted, but in your country, because the expungement process is too long, you couldn't, but in Spain they should, they make the case so that the authorities don't look at that record. I hope that I explained myself. But if you're in a situation, go with a lawyer. Don't apply. It's not a don't apply by yourself. It's not a straightforward case. Am I still eligible with a no live trace? Yes, you are, but they will ask for an extra report from the ACRO or police in the UK. That shows what is the record that is underlying the no live trace. They want to know what it is. And depending on that, they will or not add friction into the process. Can I expedite the background federal apostille in the US? No, but I recommend a service that is based on DC that have walk-in service, and they can get you the federal background check, federal apostille, sorry, in 10 days, okay? Of course, for a price. Just getting the normal way, the apostille in the US can take sometimes something between 4 to 8 weeks, and it costs $20, okay? But it takes time, right? Can I notarize the background check and use the state apostille instead? No, don't do it, straight denial. Where can I have my fingerprints taken? Many people don't know this, but many of the fingerprints fade out with time. So senior people, sometimes when they put their fingerprints in the scanner, if it's not very good, it won't recognize them. Some people have been hours trying to get their fingerprints scanned. Please go to a professional, professional accepted channeler by the FBI. Okay, they have them in their website. They have the list. They have everywhere in the US, for example, different offices, and they have much better scanners, right? I can send you articles about that, and they will scan your fingerprints much easier. So let's have some screenshots about the different situations. Probably need to update this, but really nothing did happen. ACRO is taking 2 days with a fast track if you pay more. Otherwise, it's taking between 2 to 6 weeks normally. In Canada, it's going quite fast. The apostille, obtaining the police check. And now let's talk about proof of not working. So typically people know this visa as the retirement visa as well, because this is the most common use case for this visa, right? But there's nothing in the law that says you couldn't apply being 18 years old, okay, if you comply with the requirements. However, the most common case, the most straightforward case, is being a pensionist. So if you prove that you are receiving a pension, straightforward case, they will not scrutinize more, okay? Now, if you're still working, be careful. Depending where you are applying from and your specific situation, they may be or not more flexible. In the UK, for sure, they will want your P45, so that you resign, you get the P45, and you submit it. Okay. In the US, resignation letter, termination letter from employer, both translated and notarized. If you're freelancers in the US, notarized affidavit promising not to work, and in the UK, a letter from HMRC and accountant stating having ceased trading and deregistered for self-employment. Okay. Now the big question is, should I quit before I get the visa? We're going to talk more about that. Is renting out a property considered a job? If it's size matters. If you have 1, 2 properties and you rent them out long term, it's passive income. If you have 30 properties and you rent them on Airbnb, it is a business, okay? So what people say is you should appoint a property manager, prove it very well, okay, so that the authorities don't consider you to be working in the operation of that business. It is not a problem to have a business, but you can't be involved in it, okay? Is investing in stocks considered active income? No. Can I volunteer while on an NLV? Yes, as long as you don't get paid. New slide here, managing property rentals denial. This is very new, okay? But the application was July 31st, 2024, and the refusal was February 26, 2025, so a long processing. And they said, and this was absurd, and I agree, in their letter of intent, there was a verbiage error, and they said, gestionamos, okay? That means in Spanish, we manage a group of properties on Airbnb. We manage. Just because of this, they had lawyers. The lawyers didn't catch that detail. They got refused. And then they were thinking about moving somewhere else and changing consulate and apply again from another consulate. So imagine how crazy this is. Be careful with that, okay? Be careful with that. So many people, and especially people in the US who have their current health insurance linked to their jobs, and if they quit their jobs, they're basically left without health insurance coverage. So it's not only the money that you stop earning, but it's also that you just, renounce to your health insurance coverage. So a lot of people, they just want to work until the very last moment and not stop working unless they get their visa granted. But this is common to most of the consulates. They want you to quit the job, okay? If you don't do it, then you are taking a risk, okay? So in the UK, they want the P45 most of the times. Someone summarizes it well. Looks like a bit of potluck if they accept a letter from HR department in place of a P45 if working up to the last minute. And until the day of today, they're asking in the group, can I work in Edinburgh? Can I work until the very end in Manchester? There's no clear answer, okay? And generally what happens is that if you applied without the P45, they will ask you for the P45. When they are ready to approve your NLV, you still have to provide it, okay? That's the case of the UK. Now, if you go to the USA, it will depend on the consulate. It will depend on who's reviewing your case. This is the truth. For example, Houston, it was common knowledge that if you promise to stop working in the future, but before the date in which you wanted your visa to start, then you were okay, right? But this person in Houston BLS couldn't submit the document in this situation. Whereas this couple in DC did this, and they could submit their documents. So as you can see, huge variation. San Francisco, October 30th, not long ago, accepted documentation showing termination date after the appointment date, provided the applicant legally attested the ceasing all work. So San Francisco was open to this situation. Okay, so very interesting. And another big one linking to this situation, can consulates Google you? A lot of people say, like, this is absolutely illegal. They cannot Google you, right? Well, they did. In 2023, in December, Buenos Aires consulate, where I'm from, a Venezuelan national applied, and he got refused his NLV because he showed activity on his LinkedIn. So they Googled him, found on LinkedIn that he was showing activity. He appealed the case, went to the court in Madrid, and the Madrid court said that the consulate was right. Okay, so they can perfectly Google you. So if you have any trace that you are working at the time of application and that consulate is strict about this situation, or is not matching your speech, let's say, or application, you could have trouble, right? So my recommendation is quit your job before submission, okay, if you want to be on the super safe side. If not, try to be careful on how you do it, okay? Now let's talk about marriage, birth certificates, non-married couples. Married couples will need a valid and updated certificate, usually 6 months valid, but also, depending on the consulate and the certificate, 3 months validity as well. They tend to be more flexible, as per I know as word, and they sometimes, most of the time, will consider 6 month validity if it is expired after 3 months, but consider it 3 months just to be on the safe side. Children need also birth certificates, the same, 3 to 6 month validity, always translated, always apostilled by the authorities that issued them. For example, if you got married in California state in the US, you need a California state apostille. Yes. If you got married in Trinidad and Tobago, apostilled by Trinidad and Tobago, or Cyprus. Okay, that sometimes take even longer than the police checks, and you should start by them. I have an interview of an English couple who got married in Trinidad and Tobago, and they said that it was very long to obtain an apostille from that island. So be careful with that. Non-married couples can also apply, but they will need to prove their relationship. So there's 2 ways: as legal partners, so a legal partnership document is a strong case. Second case, you don't have a legal partnership document, you can prove that you're stable partners if you prove 1 year of cohabitation, and you can make the case stronger by having a child together. Okay, but the cohabitation is still a condition. Certificates always need to be apostilled by the country who issued them, and so on, translated into Spanish. when necessary. Of course, if you got married in Colombia, you don't need a sworn translation. The certificate will be in Spanish. Frequently asked question, what about adult children and ascendants? Unfortunately, they cannot be dependents any longer and must apply as main applicants as of May 20th, 2025. And if you watch Spainguru's YouTube channel, I'm sure you do, a previous interview that I made to a Michigan couple who moved here to Pedregalejo in Malaga, they were planning to apply with their 30-year-old daughter, but in the middle, the reglamento changed, and she could not apply as a dependent, and she had to apply with a student visa instead, right? So there you have a case. You can read Article 61 in the reglamento, underline in red everything that I just said. And we mentioned so many times so far, what are sworn translators? Sworn translators are accredited by the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. They pass a hard exam to become certified. Each sworn translator has a unique registration number. Their translations are accepted by all Spanish institutions, including consulates. Translations are done remotely and signed with a legally valid electronic signature. So no physical mail is needed. You don't need to send papers overseas. You send everything by email or you upload it to a platform. So if you work with my recommended companies or sworn translators, either you send by email with attachments of PDFs, scans, okay, and they will return you the translations digitally also as PDFs. You print out that and you add that to the files. And that's all you need to do. You don't need to print anything on paper, okay, when working with a sworn translator. You will see that on the PDF. There is a signature and a stamp that says their unique registration number. Frequently asked question, can I use any translator from the American Translator Association? No. Big misleading thing from LA, official requirement list. In Miami as well, they said you can use ATA. Has nothing to do with sworn translators from Spain. The only one who can appoint a sworn translator is the Spanish Ministry of Foreign Affairs. A translator that is part of that association has nothing to do with this, okay, unless they happen to be a sworn translator from Spain, right? So be careful with that. It can be misleading. And you can find my recommendations on Spainguru. Can a sworn translator work with several language pairs? No, they only work with one. English, Spanish, Spanish, English, for example, or German, Spanish, Spanish, German, right? But only one. So if you have different language pairs, maybe better to work with a platform, okay? My top first recommendation is a platform that offers you sworn translators for every single language pair, like German, Italian, French, you name it. How much do a sworn translator translation cost? Anywhere between 36 to 45 euros, depending on complexity of the document by page, or how urgent you want the translations. That would be around the cost. Now, many companies also, they have in-house sworn translators, okay, like lawyers, etc., who will offer you like price packages depending, by bulk, okay? So when you hire these professional services, sworn translations are semi or generally included, okay, or not. Make sure to clarify that before hiring. What comes first, apostille and sworn translation? Well, look at that. That's why you need to be part of a community, because you are on the loop, okay? This person went to San Francisco, sworn translated a document that was apostilled, but didn't sworn translate the apostille. Now the officer, the BLS San Francisco, said, you need to also provide the sworn translation of the apostille itself, okay? So this person started rushing, using the phone, like contacting the sworn translator, like send me the sworn translator of the apostille right now, okay, right now, and got it and then printed it out and added it to the file, okay, just like that. So that can happen. It happens, okay? So the answer is, some people, especially the ones who provide apostilles in different languages, including Spanish, prefer to save some money and not sworn translate the apostille itself. But the lawyers who have been through many of these battles, they will sworn translate also the apostilles. Not only the original document, also the apostille. So that, again, it is your appetite to risk and wanted to save some money. Now, the big question is about sworn translation of bank statements, because they tend to be a lot of documents, right? So 3 months versus 12 months. Imagine 12 months of bank statements. That's hundreds, if not thousands of euros in sworn translations. I asked on the group, did you sworn translate it? Roughly 77% of people said that they didn't translate them. 17% translated only summary pages. 3% sworn translated everything 2%, had a bank that provided statements in Spanish. This is the case of Chase, as far as I know, in the US. So that's also good. So you would save some money. So this is the situation about translating sworn bank statements. Okay, I mentioned before about this couple who moved from Michigan to Malaga, to the city where I am now, and definitely you should watch it. They tell you why they moved. They share with you the budget comparison from the US to what they're spending now. It's only 20 minutes, all packed, and definitely worth having a look. Just go on Spainguru's YouTube channel and watch it. Okay, and remember there is a Q&A session at the end after this presentation. And if you have to leave earlier and you want to leave a nice review on Trustpilot, you're welcome to do so. It makes me extremely happy. Helps others find this content. There's a button there on the top that will redirect you to Trustpilot if you want to leave a review. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please give it a like, subscribe. And if you have any questions, please comment below. Now let's talk about during the application. The application process. All family members must apply. Consider that you will have to apply in person at BLS office or consulate, okay? But some consulates, like for example, Panama, is all by mail. Used to be the case of Melbourne, now it's also in person, okay? So they tend to go to in-person appointments, okay? Especially if they work with BLS, there's always appointment in person if they work with BLS, okay? But sometimes they will give you the option to send you back your passports with hopefully the visa inside or that denial letter. But many times you need to travel to the office and pick it up in person. And everyone who applied, including children, need to be present. So check always that, okay? Now the new non-lucrative visa is valid for 365 days, used to be 90 days. So it gives you more flexibility to enter the Spanish country under the visa validity period. And you have, if you check here on the right, there's the multi-entry, okay? So it's a big bottleneck. Once you enter Spain, you are technically required to get your residency card within a 30-day window from your entry. But that never happens because there's no appointments at the police stations. And what can you do to get in and out of the country? Use your visa because it will have multi-exit entry, okay, into Spain, okay, for a full year. So it used to happen that the 90 days expired initially, the visa validity, and people didn't get their residency card and they were left in no man's land, if you will. Common mistakes to avoid: not checking specific consular requirements, okay, listening to people like me, okay, I'm not an immigration lawyer, I'm not an official list of requirements. Always read the source. Consulate in English and Spanish, there may be variations. Check the BLS page in English, and always check the internal requirements. These are requirements that are not published anywhere, but these are the requirements that people share, okay, when they share their first-hand experiences. That's why it's very important that you're part of the community, and also you follow the first-hand experiences on Spainguru, dedicated page for each consulate. Then wrong or expired documents, wrong chronology, non-compliant health insurance, reimbursement clauses, for example. Say that you plan to work, like these people unfortunately said gestionamos, or people who in their rights say, I want to take a sabbatical year and then go back to the States and take and find a job after it. Even if that is completely possible and should not be a denial reason, it could be used against you. So some people say like you should be honest, yes, when you go to the appointment, but you also have to be smart, okay? So and choose what you say and what you not, and what you write and how you write it. Be careful with that, okay? Not joining Spainguru's NLB community is also a big mistake, in my opinion. Time. How much in advance should I start preparing before moving to Spain? You start normally 6 months in advance, doing the planning, dust gathering, appointment. Remember the validity of the official documents, the apostilles. You need to sworn translate everything, okay? And something I didn't say, the medical certificate is valid for 3 months. Be careful with that one too. Most consulates will retain passports during processing. Now, the US nationals, they can get very easily by mail a second passport, while the first passport is retained by the Spanish consulate. Whereas the UK applicants, it's very tough or nearly impossible to get a second passport, so always plan on that. Now, certain consulates, supposedly Manchester, they have a form where you can make your case to keep your UK passport. For example, if you need to travel to Spain to buy a property, whatever, and maybe you convince them to return your passport while the visa is being processed, but it is not very clear how successful people are being with that, okay? Now, let's break down the process, and excuse me, I'm gonna take a little bit of water. Documents preparation typically takes between 2 to 3 months. Attaining the appointment normally on the third month. I say normally, this can change drastically. Waiting for the approval could be anything from 1 week to, and you saw for Manchester, taking 15 weeks, 20 weeks, supposedly maximum 3 months, okay, or 12 weeks, but it's depending on how clogged the workload is, can take more, okay? And if they want extra documentation, they will only give you 10 days to provide it. So be careful with that. You can choose a visa start date in the future date from submission also. And officially, you will have 30 days to get your residency card once you are in Spain, visiting a national police station and putting your fingerprints. Now, someone said, you can ask for the visa to be valid for up to 3 months in advance, so to start it in the future. However, the difficulty I found was finding a health insurance company who would work that far out, as mostly only due 2 months in advance. And now I can safely say it's only 1 month. However, if you use my recommended exclusive agent, he can extend the start date in the future, as long as you need. So that's also very, very important. Now let's look at how the application process more or less looks like. Of course, any of this is for illustrative purposes only. Any of these stages can overlap other stages. You could argue that you should start getting the appointment even before getting your FBI background check. So take it with a pinch of salt. But first, find out what your consulate is and if it works with BLS. Second, read the official requirements. Compare them. Check them every single 15 days. Third, start with the hard documents. For example, the police checks. If you got married in a strange jurisdiction like Seychelles or something like that, be careful. Start with that first, maybe. Then obtain a medical certificate. Watch at the validity of the documents. Get them apostilled by the authorities that issued them. So translate them into Spanish when necessary. Sort out your private health insurance or obtain your S1 form if you're a UK pensionist, if you prefer. Book your appointment, or maybe start doing that before, even 2 months earlier. Attend the appointment in person, if applicable. Then submit all your documents. Every document needs to be valid when you submit. Wait for notification, typically officially 12 weeks. Can be shorter, can be longer. Then collect your visa on your passport or receive it in your home and travel to Spain within the visa validity period. Once you enter Spain, there's a few steps, including obtaining the empadronamiento, which is the registration of your rental contract in the city hall as a proof of address that you will need to obtain your residency card in 90% of cases. And people get, of course, extremely paranoid about obtaining the appointments because the consulates are understaffed, and especially in seasonal periods like summertime and Christmas, there's less staff. And this is a screenshot of someone who is sharing their tips to get appointments at San Francisco consulate and what to have ready when you finally obtain one, so it doesn't catch you in surprise. So yes, follow the community, read the tips, because they can really be a lifesaver. Another way to see the time frames for each one of these things is this one. If you see every column is 1 month, starting 1 year earlier, and you start with the police check, marriage certificate, birth certificate if you're moving with family. Remember, they're valid for 3 months or more. Getting apostille and strong translation, financial documents 2 months before the appointment, make a certificate 2 months before the appointment, health insurance a little bit closer to the appointment, and trying to get the appointment, go to the appointment, allow a processing period, and get your visa, travel to Spain, and be happy. That's another way to see it. Now, there's an update with the new reglamento or new regulation of the law or bylaw. The Spanish authorities or legislators want to make things happen faster. The thing is that reality sometimes is different, but at least in the rules, they're setting up shorter time frames for everything to try to speed up all this process. So now, the decision deadline should be 1 month from the consulate communication. Okay, so supposedly after 1 month, you could start, let's say, an appeal process. If you wanted, no one does, but this is what the law says. Maybe in the future this is real, and you could consider that it was rejected by default, although this is not real either. It just takes longer to process. But if you want to read the law, the Article 63, this is what the Article 63 says. Hopefully in the future, this will be a reality, that only in 1 month, you should get a decision and the possibility to appeal this. Now let's go back to taxes, because a big question is about capital gains tax. Okay, I'm sorry I'm making you dizzy, maybe going one way or another, but this is the moment to talk about people who may be planning to sell their homes in their home countries before moving to Spain. And in many of those countries, states, there's no capital gains. But if you become a Spanish tax resident and you sell your home in your home country, Spanish tax authorities want to get your capital gains tax. So be careful with that. There's many ways to avoid it, not only timing your move to Spain and when you become a Spanish tax resident and when you sell your home. For example, if you sell your primary home and you use 100% of the proceeds into buying a new primary home within 2 years after or before the operation, you could mitigate or eliminate the capital gains tax, etc., etc. But the best way to do it generally is to time how and when you sell your home. As we said, the tax year is a calendar year that starts every January 1st. So if you sell before January 1st, you will be selling a property in a different tax year. Okay? So, example, you sell on December 31st and you move to Spain on January 1st. They fall into different tax years. You did not become a Spanish tax resident in the year in which you sold your home. You're in the safe side. Now, very common case, people who sell their homes the same year in which they move to Spain. You gotta be careful. Rule number one, if you spend more than 183 days physically in Spain during a calendar year, you become a tax resident for the whole calendar year. That is retroactively from January 1st, right? So if you sold in January, you got your visa in April, moved to Spain in June, and you stayed in Spain until the end, you spent more than 183 days, that made you a Spanish tax resident. Tax authorities will want capital gains tax on your sale of your home in January. Now, if you move after July 2nd, you're on the safe side because there's only 182 days left during that tax year, provided you haven't been a single second before. Remember that if you were as a tourist earlier in the year, those days should count too. So be careful with that. Doesn't matter your immigration status. Want to know more about taxes? Join my webinar. Now, let's talk about after the approval. We mentioned about Schengen. There's the 29 groups of European countries that is internally borderless from immigration status. Now, there's two ways to arrive to Spain. Either you are coming from outside of Schengen. For example, you fly from Newark to Malaga. Yes, you will find an immigration control because you're entering Schengen. Now, if you fly from Newark to Frankfurt in Germany, you find an immigration control in Frankfurt. They will stamp your passport or they will scan your face with the new entry-exit system. But then you could be spending 1 month in Germany and they don't know when you travel to Spain, if you ever do so, right? Because if you go directly to Spain from Germany or you travel by train via France, Italy, etc., you don't know because there's no immigration control when you enter Spain. Now, a lot of people, and we have an argument this morning, people say like, yeah, you just show your boarding passes or your train tickets or your gas station and your gas ticket. Somebody said like, but I'm traveling with an electric car. I don't have a gas ticket. Then go to the station with a bottle and fill with gas and get a ticket for it. Please, if you enter from inside Schengen and you don't have proof of your entry into Spain, there is a document called the Declaración de Entrada, or entry statement or entry declaration. It is a one-page document. You print it out. You go to the nearest police station next to the border or in the airport, okay, or train station. You have 72 hours from the entry in Spain. They will stamp it, and now you have an official proof of entry into Spain. And once you go to get your residency card, you show this as proof of entry. It is official. It's not like a piece of paper of a gas station, and hopefully the police officer will trust you, okay? Because some people were lucky, and the police officer said, okay, fine, you enter this date. In other cases, they said, I don't trust this. You need to get out of Schengen and come back and get a stamp or proof of entry into Spain. So be careful with that, okay? Now, once you enter, there's several things that are recommended, like getting a Spanish SIM card, okay? You need to receive SMS from the different authorities, or if you're open a bank account, they will send you 2FA messages for confirmation. Also, keep control of your phone in your origin country, okay? Porting your phone, etc. So make sure that you have both operational Also recommend open a non-resident bank account, okay, until you get your TIE card. You will be considered to be a non-resident. Obtain the empadronamiento, as we said, go to with the rental contract to the city hall. It takes some time to obtain, but that certificate is very important because 90% of cases, police stations will require it from you in order to issue the residency card. Okay, so try to get it. Minimum for, in most cases, you will need a rental contract of 6 months, and make sure that the landlord allows you to get the empadronamiento. This is important, okay? And again, get your residency card. If you want help with each step that you need to do, please use my step-by-step checklist for moving to Spain. It is free, no sign up. You just go and sit there. I never knew that you went to see it, and you will see every single step that you need to do, in my opinion. Of course, there's variations. There's no legal advice. It's a suggestion, starting as early as 1 year before moving to Spain, including all the steps, recommended steps, more than 10 of the things that, in my opinion, you should do. In my opinion, and the community opinion of people who've done it and who regretted not doing some of those steps, recommended, okay? And I put everything there, so check it out. It is free for you, okay? Now, a lot of people face some issues, okay? Like, for example, in Valencia, a typical place where people are moving, sometimes 4 months without getting appointments, sometimes 5 months without getting appointments at the police. Okay, so people start to freak out. Supposedly, I need to get my residency card in the first 30 days. But the truth is that almost no one does because there's a huge appointment bottleneck there. So you need to be flexible, maybe travel to other towns in the same province to try to get your TA card. But, and it can take several months, so don't freak out. Okay, the cool thing is now you have a visa that is valid for 1 year and that has entry and exits. Okay, so that's very interesting. Now, a big question is, do I really need the empadronamiento? Now, officially, really no, but 90% of the police stations will require it. So if you can obtain it, please do it. Okay, but the thing is, like, you will, because of the lack of appointments, you will need to get an appointment somewhere, and maybe in that place where you got an appointment, they want the certificado de empadronamiento. But several lawyers have used Airbnb receipts, booking.com receipts, even rental contracts, okay, of less than 6 months. Okay, so you need to prove your address. The best proof is showing empadronamiento, but it is not the only one. Now let's talk about the renewal process. So typically, when you enter Spain with your visa validity, the date of entry in Spain, when you get your residency card, the policeman should establish that your start of your residency is the date in which you enter Spain. So from that date plus 365 days, that will be the expiration date of your residency card. Now, you can start renewing your visa or residency 60 days before the expiration date. And it is recommended that you start as early as 60 days before. Why? Because if things have problems, or for any reason, they deny you, they require more documents that you don't have, whatever, you still have time because you can still renew up to 180 days after expiration date of your TA card. Okay, so you will renew after 1 year. They will give you 2 more years. You will renew 4 years, 4 and 5, total 5 years. And after 5 years, if you comply with the requirements, you'll be eligible to apply for the long-term residency, which is much better than the non-lucrative residency. Okay, remember that sometimes they will ask you for twice the amount of the financial threshold, especially if you're applying with savings and in certain provinces. Okay, some people argue that in most provinces, some people say that in less provinces. For example, in Madrid, it's only 1 time, I heard, but in Alicante, it's twice. And remember that after 5 years, you still need to comply with certain requirements for the long-term residency. It is not automatic. Now, big controversial thing. In the Reglamento de Extranjería or bylaw, remember the lower hierarchy regulation of the main hierarchy law, they included a minimum stay requirement to renew your temporary visa, in this case non-lucrative, of 183 days. And people say, like, you need to become a Spanish tax resident to renew your non-lucrative visa, which is not really true. Okay, it's better if you do it, but it's not really a requirement. First of all, because the 183 days minimum stay requirement is related to the immigration year, not the tax year. That is a natural year. It's not the calendar year. Second of all, there is a Supreme Court ruling saying that legislators are including a requirement that it is illegal to include in a reglamento. They should include in the main organic law, going through more controls, more political agreements, etc. And they don't want to do that. That's why they include it in the reglamento. And the Supreme Court, who know more the law then the legislators already has a ruling stating that they should delete this minimum stay requirement. They did it in the past, and now they included this minimum stay again, and we're waiting until they delete it. Okay, but of course, every lawyer will tell you, no, yes, you need to stay minimum 183 days in Spain because they don't want to have any problems. But the truth is, and if you watch the videos with Ainhoa Manero, if they had to deny you, if they denied you because you stay less than 183 days in an immigration year, you have 100% chance to win because there's a Supreme Court saying that they should not have this requirement. Okay, now we're talking only about the renewal of the non-lucrative visa. If you're planning to stay for the long-term residency, if you're planning to apply for the citizenship, they have their own minimum stay requirements that you also need to comply. Okay, so always treat this holistically, okay, strategically. If you're planning to stay for the long term in Spain, always consult with an expert immigration lawyer who understands the full picture. Okay, but if you plan to stay in Spain more than 90 days, but less than 183 days, not becoming a Spanish tax resident, and still be able to renew and play around with this, spend longer terms without becoming a Spanish tax resident, it is also very, very possible. So take that, okay, with a pinch of salt. I'm not an immigration lawyer. This is not legal advice. Please consult with people who know. Let's talk about that renewal process case study. Imagine a couple. We said that in 2026, they need a financial threshold of 36,000 euros. They live in a province that they require double the amount. They will need to prove 72,000 euros. Imagine the main applicant has a 30,000 pension euros annually. Since it is recurring income, in 2 years, this person will cash 60,000 euros, and that counts as 60,000 euros. So they just need to provide 12 more thousand euros to reach 72,000 euros financial threshold. They use savings, for example, or they use, as I said, be careful, rental income. They use dividends. They use credit card credit, okay, that they can prove that it is liquid, right? Documentation requirements, ongoing private medical insurance coverage, no gaps, or public, updated passport copies for both individuals, no police records, also very important. People who drive under the influence in Spain and stuff like that could face denials. And now for the renewal, the empadronamiento tends to be a requirement also. Now, let's talk about minimum stay requirements. We said that the renewal minimum stay requirement is a legal ambiguity today for the renovation of the visa. But if you want to obtain the long-term residency after 5 years, first, your residency should be uninterrupted. Second, no health insurance gaps. Third, you can maximum be outside of Spain 10 months in the previous 5 years. Those 10 months don't need to be consecutive, but never in blocks of more than 6 months. Okay, so comply with that. And if you're planning to apply for citizenship, which many people do because there is the 2-year fast track for Ibero-American country passport holders, Filipinos, Guinea-Bissau, Andorra, and Portugal, in only 2 years of legal residency, they can already apply, even before long-term residency, they can already apply for the Spanish passport. Now, in that case, maximum, they can be outside of Spain 90 days per each of the 2 years before applying for the citizenship. Now, if you're a holder of a long-term residency, to apply for the Spanish citizenship, you cannot be outside Spain more than 1 year outside, the European Union, or no more than 30 months in 5 years. So all those minimum stay requirements overlap depending on what you want to get. Now let's talk about transition to work permit after 1 year. There are several pathways, but these are the 3 most common. First, if you start your own business after 1 year of residency, it is much easier that they grant you this, much easier. But by no means I'm saying it is automatic or a right or anything. You need to apply and see if they approve you or not. Okay? So you need to prove that the business is, how you say, you need to supply a business plan and prove that it's going to work. They need to trust you, and you get a cuenta propia work permit and residency, or you get sponsored by a company who will hire you and you get a job offer, and it's called cuenta ajena, for example, teaching English, for example. Or the most controversial one that proves the fact that people are working remotely under non-lucrative residency is to transition from a non-lucrative residency into a digital nomad residency, which has a requirement that you have been working remotely at least 3 months before the application, right? So how come? Yes, but still they are doing this. Now, the best timing to do this transition into work permit is first renew your non-lucrative residency so that you get a 2-year period with legal residency, because then if you apply and you get denied for any reason, you still have the non-lucrative residency and you can apply again, changing your file, right? So don't apply for the work permit before renewing, okay? If you can. As we mentioned, there's a 2-year fast track for those countries in red. Otherwise, Spanish citizenship eligibility by legal residency is generally 10 years for nationals from the US, Canada, UK, etc. Okay, so if you have the possibility to obtain an Ibero-American passport, a lot of people in the US, for example, they have Mexican parents, or if you are from Puerto Rico by origin or have Puerto Rican parents and you can get a Puerto Rican citizenship certificate, you can reduce the 10 years initial requirement to only 2 years. Okay, and you can apply for the non-lucrative visa with an American passport and then use your Ibero-American passport to benefit from the 2-year fast track. I have many videos about this, big video this year with thousands of views with Ainhoa that you can watch if you're interested. Remember that you can use Spainguru for free, weekly newsletter that is sent every Monday to 18,000 members, YouTube channel with more than 8,500 subscribers, more than 2,000 articles, 8 webinars, community support visa guides, and a huge community waiting for you to join if you haven't done so yet. And of course, you can find several resources, step-by-step checklist moving to Spain, webinars, as I said, so many more, and new for next week. I'm releasing a new section of personal shoppers to find you, help you find rentals or even purchasing property in different areas in Spain. So soon to be released, either end of this week or next week. It's going to come out there. So yes, yet another resource for you. And of course, you can find my expert vetted professionals, at least consult with an immigration lawyer, at least with a tax advisor, and if you can, with a financial planner as well. That would be, in my opinion, what I would do if I had to move to Spain, especially if I'm a senior, especially if I'm planning to retire. I already have my funds, I already have my savings, I have properties out there. It is important, in my opinion, to have all that planned so there are no unwanted surprises. Always, you can send me an email to hello@spainguru.es. I always answer my emails. At least I point you in the right direction, give you resources, free resources, experts who can help you, articles or videos, so that you get more informed. And remember that the content of this webinar is for information purposes only, and it's not legal advice. Please always check the requirements officially published on the consulate, BLS, etc. Okay, now let's move to Q&A session. Remember, if you're watching this on YouTube, please give me a like, subscribe to the channel, and ask your questions in the comments. We're going to go to a Q&A session, and if you have to leave earlier because you're a busy person, please leave a review on Trustpilot. It only takes 5 seconds of your time. Help others find this content. It makes me extremely happy, motivates me so much. Helps, of course, find Spainguru among the huge internet. Now, let's go through the questions. Let's go scroll down all the questions. You can ask your questions right now. Make sure to add a question mark at the end so I can just click a button and publish. Now, first of all, thank you everyone for joining today, and especially for the ones asking. For Modelos 790 form, do we sign all 3 pages? Do we list our current address in the US or the address we will move to in Spain? Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that question. I don't have the form right now here in front, and I prefer not to go into those details. The best you can do is to, like, I see a lot of people asking this in the community, like different things like this. And to be honest, I never filled any of those forms. And I don't know the exact details on how to do those, but I see a lot of conversations about that. And there's still also a lot of changes. So I would rather go to the community and ask, like, how do I fill these specific blocks in the forms, and try to guide myself with that. And of course, use the official guidelines on how to do it. Normally, each official form should come with instructions at some place. Can I use a friend's home address instead of a rental contract? Yes, you can. You need to prove it. Okay, you need to get an authorization and make it look official. And depending on the consulate, you need to provide more and more proof to make sure that that works. But definitely you can. Definitely you can anywhere. If so, is there a specific form document to show that temporary residency? You can show, you need to prove that that person is actually living in that place. Okay, so depending on the status of that person, you know, you have to somehow prove and maybe get an invitation letter, etc. I don't know exactly how you prove it, okay, but definitely a lot of people go to stay to their families or their friends, etc., not to a place they rent or that they bought, and the authorities should consider that as a valid proof of address in Spain. Can I give the address of my sister that lives in Tarragona and we stay there for a while until I find a house? Yes, we just saw that. When would you recommend us to schedule the Houston consulate appointment if you want to move to Spain on September 1st? So that's month number 9, and people are taking about a couple of months to get the appointments. So you want to move on September 1st, right? So you need to consider a certain processing time before that. You need to check in the community how long that processing time is being now. It could change anytime, but at least you can take that as a hint on how much time you should allow to process and when you should get your appointment, your submission date. And then you need to work also earlier to get the appointment on that certain date. Remember that unfortunately during the summer season, it is harder. It is a little bit harder to get appointments because they're understaffed, but it is possible. They never close. They always need to give service. But yes, work from that date backwards. So allow processing time, find out from the community how long, and try to get a date that will allow that processing time to move to Spain on September 1st, or apply as soon as possible, because in the end, when you get your visa, it will be valid for 1 year. So if imagine that you got the visa today or tomorrow, yes, the 11th of February, you will have until February of 2027 to enter Spain. That would be perfect for you. No, it would be super comfortable validity period for you to move on the 1st of September or 2nd or 15th of September. Can you use funds from a retirement account or 401k? As far as I understand, if they are liquid, really accessible, without penalties, I think, yes, you can. Okay, so depending on the type of funds, right? I recently published an article about these UK funds. Let me see. That actually people say that they can use it. Okay, so I will share with you my screen. Let me see. Just to give you an example, I will share with you my screen. This is Spainguru.es. I scroll down all the way here, and here I get my last published articles. And here, this one, for example, this is, can I use my NSI premium bonds proof of funds? And people say, yes, yes, I use, yes, you can. You can present the statements, etc. Okay, this type of funds. I don't know if every single kind of funds can be used, but what I understand is that anything that is liquid, readily available without penalties should be able to use. Okay, this is not legal advice. Always consult with a professional, check the community, what they say. Regarding financial means, is the first page of the bank statement enough for the visa application showing beginning and end balance for each month? I'm not sure. I'm not sure on that. Unfortunately, I don't know the detail of that. How you can do it. Okay. Because now they're asking for a certificate that shows the average balance per month and per year as of December 31st the previous year, and that should work as those certificates. Okay, for the bank statements. So I don't know if that is enough. Okay, you need to provide those specific documents. And as I said, many banks technically don't offer you those certificates. So sometimes, and I know I was explaining this in the video that I filmed and I showed before, this one, unfortunately, sometimes you need to make them yourself if the bank cannot provide them, and then notarize them and apostille them if necessary, the signature of the notary to make them look official. But yes, I mean, you're asking me if that is enough or not. I don't know exactly. Unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that question. One of the requirements from my consulate is to show bank statements for the last 3 months. If my appointment is in June 1st, how close to my appointment do they need to be? Specifically, the most recent month. Should I wait until the night before my appointment to print my statement out? I mean, as close as possible, in my opinion. As close as possible. I don't know, like imagine my situation. You ask me this and I tell you, yes, wait until the last night, and then you have a problem and then you cannot apply. I don't want to have that burden on me. Okay, so ask the community what they would do, what they did. As far as I understand that with the statements, you need to be reasonably close to the date of application. Okay, I don't know if there was a denial because the last month statement was missing at a submission. I haven't heard that case. You see, so if you can bring the last statements, better. Yes, add it. More information if you can, but be careful. Never count on not having any issues, okay, to provide those. All right, so let's go with the next one. The San Francisco typically require rental contracts. For this, what I would do, I can't remember. For example, I know that Los Angeles doesn't require it. But right now, San Francisco, I don't know very well. What I would do is, number one, ask the community. Number one, check the official requirements, because if they ask, they will add that into the official requirements, BLS, consulate requirements in English and Spanish. But also then I will complement that information going to, if you go to Visa Guides, Spain Non-Lucrative Visa, NLV Consulate, US Consulates, San Francisco. Here, if you go all the way down, you have December 2025, September, November, first-hand experiences, okay? Maybe in any of these experiences, you know, I search the word rental, and something comes up. No rental contract or property deed was requested. Boom, you see? Now, this is a first-hand experience. I can't guarantee that you go to San Francisco and the person in front of you says, where's the rental contract, right? But here's a hint, apart from the official requirements. That's what I would do. Always read everything you can. And this is from December 2025. So quite new. If you need health insurance for the NLB, but you have not yet been approved, do you have to pay for a year of health insurance whether or not you end up living in Spain? So I guess this is related to the refund clause. Also, we had a discussion today in the group about all this. So this is the thing, that normally for visa compliant health insurance policies, you need to pay a full year in advance, right? You pay the full year. They give you a certificate of coverage, you submit that. But then what happens if anything goes wrong? For instance, if you get denied, right? What happens? So then there's the cancellation clause of the policy that you sign. You need to read the cancellation clause and all the contract, because some companies, they will have bad cancellation clauses. Some other companies will have better cancellation clauses, right? So in the case of my recommended exclusive agent, Carlos Blanco, he has a pretty nice cancellation clause that if you get your visa denied and you submit the denial letter from the consulate, you will get a full refund from Adeslas, right? But then there's horror stories from people in the group saying like, hey, will my health insurance refund me, right? No, because the refund clause put a condition saying that you need to get the denial letter with the condition that the health insurance was the reason for the denial, okay? Or they say that the refund is only 50%, or only the taxes and not the payment, etc. They have conditions in the cancellation clause. So always ask about the cancellation clauses, always, okay? Or go with people who are used to, people who offer you the best conditions. So this is the situation. Okay, let's go with the next one. Trying to display on the X1 form, section 3, domicilio effective notification, we list our current US address, or the address in Spain we're moving to. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. Sorry. I don't go into how you fill the forms, unfortunately, because I get all mixed up and I don't want to, there's not enough space in my little head for all that, unfortunately. Hola, Bruno. Do you know if Houston appointments really are taking on average 3 months? Do you have to show a letter that you've given up your current job? If it takes 3 months to get the visa, I would rather work right until the visa is granted. We went through all this information about Houston. As you saw, there was a denial in Houston of someone promising to live in the future, even if it was before the date they wanted to start their visas. So it really depends. It is not a black and white thing. And then if they're taking 3 months, to get appointments. That's something that also varies all the time. It happens that for 3 months there's nothing, and then one day they release for the following 2 months, and you get a cascade of appointments, and people go in the group and they start saying like, Houston is empty, Houston is open. You need to be all the time checking. In my opinion, unfortunately, you need to be checking the group, what people say, right, and asking all the different time frames, and you will see variations as well, right? So join this group, okay? Join it today, and ask that often. That's what I would do. Do you have any references for a healthcare broker? We need to discuss pre-existing conditions freely without impacting insurance application process with an exclusive agent. Well, yes, you can do that openly with my recommended agent. You go here, start. You can say, you can push here, or services in healthcare, or start my move today. And this page just lists all the things you need, like set up health insurance and health insurance for your visa, etc. Just fill the form and ask openly what your situation is. Okay, that's what I would do. So yeah, let's move on to the next question. It's already 16:52 here in Malaga, Spain. My consulate requires 3 years tax return. What is the purpose of this requirement? What do they want to see? I have very low income. Will that affect my qualification? If they ask for the tax return and you don't provide it, the effect, if you don't provide it, and it is a requirement, they will not approve it, in my opinion. It's normal that they ask for tax returns in general. Yeah? It's not like a crazy thing that I never read before. It is a requirement in many consulates. So, yes. So if they ask you for something, you need to provide it. Now, sometimes they ask you for crazy things. Maybe this is something that we should consider crazy. For that, it's best to go with a lawyer if you don't want to comply with those crazy interpretations, right? But we mentioned the case of rental contracts or school enrollment, yes, or being present physically in Spain when you issue the medical certificate. Tax returns is more common that they ask for them. So I don't know. If my minor daughter and I are residents of different countries, can we both apply from one consular district? That's a good one. I don't know. I heard this question before, but I never heard the answer. Better to go with a lawyer. Ask the community. I'm sorry, I don't know the answer to that question. That's very tricky. And actually, like, if you post that question on the community, right? You just post it here. You can post anonymously. If you don't want to show your name, doesn't matter. People say like, oh, they shouldn't allow anonymous posts. I allow anonymous posts. Of course, I can see who posts. Okay, I know if you're a bot or not normally. And if you don't want to share your plans to anyone, do it. And then I can read and learn from the answers, and maybe I can ask this question if it's interesting to the lawyer, right? And get an answer to this question. This is how Spainguru's knowledge base is built. I am the main applicant and I'm retired and receiving Social Security. My wife is a dependent and will have a letter stating that she will not work. Is that correct? Yep. As long as you comply with the financial thresholds and you provide the certifications proving that she's your wife, like marriage certificate, apostille untranslated, etc., etc. Yes. Yes, as long as you are over the 36,000 financial threshold in 2026 and budget for renewals and your life in Spain, then you're good, in my opinion. Remember, I'm not an immigration lawyer, okay? This is not legal advice. Regarding notarization and apostille, forms that need notarization get translated first and notarized. Show you an example. People who normally you notarize the sworn translation normally, yeah? As far as I understand, unless I'm wrong. Those that need to be apostille get the apostille first and then translated. So you sworn translate the certificate, the original certificate, and if you want to be on the safe side, you also sworn translate the apostille. Okay. Now the FBI background check, for example, never notarize it because that would impede the apostille. Okay, be careful with that. I have an article on how to apostille the FBI background check if you need. Just search Spainguru, FBI, apostille, and you have it on Google. All right, so let's go with the. Is it acceptable if your savings to meet the financial requirement was a very recent non-taxable gift from your parents? Is it okay if the bank account is newly opened 2026 and you don't have the balance for 2025? As per Ainhoa Manero's words, you don't have to have account seasoning. That is really like, you don't need to have the money more than a certain amount of time. It is not in the rules. It is not in the law. And especially, for example, if you sold your home or you received a gift, maybe you had zero before and suddenly you have $20 million in your account. That's more than enough to be on the safe side of the financial threshold, right? So this about the account seasoning is something that it is, sometimes a little bit mystical, okay? And if you had any problem or you got a denial, you could perfectly argue that you have enough money. Now, if you get a gift, a lot of people found scrutiny because they in the consulate, they thought that you had to give the money back. So if you get a certificate, if you get an authorized statement saying that you don't have to pay that money back, that would normally suffice to receive a gift to cover it for your financial threshold, okay? But please find out better, go with a lawyer, really, in this situation. This is not a straightforward case. You need to really state it and frame it the correct way, okay? But it is entirely possible. A lot of people move with a gift, okay? And the money should not be in the bank account for a minimum time before applying. I'm from Puerto Rico, and my first language is Spanish. Can I write the affidavit for not working and letter of intent in Spanish only, or do I need to provide the English version as well? I think you can do it directly in Spanish, in my opinion. Yes, but every document that is not provided in Spanish, that is official, you need to translate it into Spanish. Okay, but yes, definitely you should write in Spanish. But be careful, because the Spanish from Spain is a bit different, slightly different, and you can see how the wording can have an impact in the decision, okay? Like with the case that we saw about gestionamos and we manage was misunderstood by the authorities. So be careful with that too, okay? Just pay attention to that. And also, if I had to write the letter of intent, even if I'm a Spanish speaker, I have to be very careful about the wording. I'm planning to apply online for renewal, and I got a new passport in June 2025. Should I scan my old passport or only the new one? In my opinion, you have to provide what I've seen from previous articles, but it's been a while. I don't get updated on this, but you always have to have a copy or scan of your old passport, okay? And be able to provide both if you can. But maybe now you tell me that Mercurio doesn't accept you the only one passport. So I'm not very, very sure about how you do that. But from what I read from previous articles, but as I said, it's been a while I don't read about that. You need to show information for what you have been doing during the previous period, okay? So if that is not proven with your new passport, you will also have to show it with the previous passport, okay? So questions? If I'm planning to get residency by the 1 to June NLB renewal process, am I covered if I spend at least 183 days in Spain each year? I plan to divide my time between Spain and the US. So we went through this in depth. Like, the minimum stay requirement is an ambiguous situation right now in order to renew. But if you want to plan to stay longer and be able to apply for the long-term residency, you can be outside of Spain more than 10 months in the previous 5 years, and definitely no more than 6 months in one block. So be careful with that. But yes, if you spend at least 183 days in the immigration year in Spain, then there wouldn't be any situation. You would be complying with the law that actually the Supreme Court says it shouldn't be there. So that's the minimum stay requirement, right? So yes, definitely you could. And of course, if you comply with the other requirements of the renewal, the minimum stay is just one of them. Right. More questions. We're currently UK residents and we were married in the Dominican Republic. The marriage certificate is in Spanish. Can we just get the certificate apostille without any translation? Yes. So it is the Dominican Republic authorities who need to apostille the certificate, get a new copy of the certificate with a certain validity. If the certificate states the validity, then great. If not, consider 3 months. And you don't need to soon translate it because it is in Spanish already. So yes, apostille by the Dominican Republic authorities, but not necessary to sworn translate it. Okay, there's no legal advice. I'm not an immigration lawyer, but I'm pretty sure that is the answer. Am I understanding correctly that there is a new rule for the NLD stating that you have to reside in Spain 183 days in a calendar year if your first year in order to renew your visa. Yes, but it is ambiguous because of the Supreme Court ruling. If I apply for my visa in June, month 6, and I don't receive my visa until September, does that mean I can renew my LV the following year? So you receive your visa in September, and when do you travel to Spain? Because when you travel to Spain and the date of entry within the visa validity, that date of entry is when the immigration year starts counting. So you get your visa in September, and imagine that you get it on September 1st, and the visa starts in September 1st. You can enter Spain from September 1st, 2026 to September 1st, 2027, anytime during that year. And when you enter Spain anytime during that year, that should be the start date of your residency. So the 183-day period should start counting when you enter Spain. Yes, and this should be confirmed by the starting date of your residency card. Right? Does that mean I have to do the initial LV application all over again? If I apply my visa until about September, does it mean I can't renew my LV following year? So yeah, I think maybe if you watch the video where I show the timings and the immigration year and everything, maybe you can do your calculations again and make sure that your plan is feasible. What if you're purchasing a property within the first 3 months of arrival in Spain? Will an Airbnb address be acceptable for the padrón? This is, it is the ayuntamientos or city halls that set the rules for the empadronamiento. So each city is different, but they all tend to be similar, okay? And generally, a minimum rental contract of 6 months is what is generally accepted, right? And also you have to have the permission of the owner of the property to get your empadronamiento, okay? So an Airbnb address for empadronamiento is not common, okay? Because normally you stay less than 6 months in Airbnb, but if you have a rental contract of 6 months, then it's fine. It is, let's say, if it's an Airbnb or not, it's not what, the category of thing that we're gonna be looking at. We're looking at the type of rental contract and how long it is. If you buy a property and you can get an empadronamiento in the property that you bought. You just show your property deeds and you say like, now I'm living here. And then you get an empadronamiento with your property deeds. Do you have a list of banks that allow non-resident accounts? Most brick and mortar banks. Okay, or all of them, right? So, I don't know, in the back of my head, Santander, BBVA, Sabadell, CaixaBank, Unicaja, any of those, right? Allow, yes, non-resident bank accounts. If you stay in Schengen region, such as Italy, France, etc., will Spain know if you were outside of Spain? So, I don't know anyone that they enforced this. Let's say, if there was no immigration control and you left Spain into another Schengen country, most of the times it's not enforceable. The fact that you're outside, because there's no trace. If they wanted to investigate you, I believe, and trust me, that they have all the elements needed to know exactly what you're doing at every single moment. Okay, but if you're not a highly searched person, maybe that won't happen, right? Now, also that happened that within Schengen, there are immigration controls in specific circumstances. For example, during the Olympics in France, in Paris, there's been a lot of immigration controls in the border. So people who weren't expecting to get stamps, suddenly they got them, or controls. So there's been records of them being outside of Spain. So you shouldn't count on that very much, very, very much, okay? Always try to observe the rules, so minimum stay requirements. And generally, the minimum stay requirements are talking about Spain and not Schengen in general. So do it with caution. If you're going to do it, I don't recommend it. Always abide by the rules. But yeah, if you're inside Schengen and they don't notice, they didn't notice. What passport pages do we need to copy and provide in the visa application? First pages with pictures or an info of all of them. I understand that all of them. I'm planning to apply online for renewal, and I got new passport in June 2025. Should I scan my old passport, only new one? Sorry, this one I already published, and I didn't know very well. Do U.S. citizens currently living in a different country need to return to the States for consular appointment, or can we use a BLS in the country? For example, working in Germany and want to move to Spain upon return from current job. So if you're a legal resident in Germany, you should you can use the consulate from Spain in that area, right? Now, some people said, for example, people asking from Istanbul, that you need to stay at least 2 years in Turkey, for example, to be considered to be a full-time resident and being able to use the Istanbul consulate. I don't know in which rule they based that statement. If you're a legal resident within a jurisdiction of a consulate, like if you're American and you live in Germany and you have a legal residence in the country, you should be able to use the Spanish consulate that serves that area. Okay, and also the Spanish consulates in your origin country as well. Tax returns in the United States can be really long. They have to be completely translated into Spanish. There's no right or wrong answer to that one. So you need to comply with the requirements. If the requirements list tax returns, you should have to provide them. And whether they have to be sworn translated or not, there's a big discussion among the groups. To be on the safe side, you need to sworn translate them. But of course, if it's a huge amount of money, maybe you can mitigate that by only sworn translating the main pages and leaving the details without sworn translation and stuff like that. So I think we made it till the end of the questions. We have here, do birthday certificates need to be new with a new signature or only the marriage certificate? Everything needs to be new, unfortunately. You cannot use an old birth certificate. They normally have a 3-month validity, so you need to obtain a new copy of it, sworn translate and apostille. What financial documents are required for renewal? Bank statements. Are 2 documents sufficient? Balance certificate and average certificate, and online is okay from bank app. Sorry, I don't know the details exactly what you need to provide. So I think we made it till the end. Many of the questions put me to the limit. Unfortunately, I don't know so many details about the specifics of the application and the paperwork. But I really, really appreciate that. Really, I like when you push me to the limit, and you really did. It was a big ping pong of questions and answers. Really appreciate your time here, that you spend it till the end. Remember, I will send you a recording very soon. I will upload it to Spainguru's YouTube channel. If you think this is valuable, the time we spent today, the information that I shared with you today, please leave a review on Trustpilot. It will really help me and others find this content. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please leave a review. Sorry, give it a like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below any of the questions you may have. Really appreciate you guys joining today from so many different places, especially people who had to wake up early today. I know it takes a lot of effort. And, well, I stay in touch. You can always send me an email to hello@spainguru.es, and I always answer my emails later or shortly, but I do. And hope to see you soon. Wish you a good luck. I hope to see you in the next webinars. Thank you so much. Take care, and goodbye.